Stiff and strong.
Thank you so much.
All you really need to say is like, we survey people like the market service district. We have been to who's classifications?
So then this is like as well like
All the levels. Class S, A, B, C, D, E, that means Pink Russia.
Maybe 6. I don't know. It said 6, and I thought, oh, no problem.
Was that how?
Then it was 5:30. They were loading.
Was that how Pharaoh responded the
What
last
is
time
the
Moses
best
came
way?
before him? Bring some taxis around the front. The Israelites will be checking out. Oh, jeez. Karen, go.
I'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon to this meeting of the City of Orem Planning Commission. Appreciate all of you being here. And I've asked Mickey Cochran to offer an invocation.
We'll do so. Father, we again meet as a planning commission and citizens, grateful for the opportunity to be actively involved in the growth and development of Orem City. We pray that as we're here this afternoon, that we might be kind, be courteous one to another, and ask appropriate questions and make appropriate comments. And we do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Would remind everyone that the meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube. And with that, let's go ahead with item 3.1.
My name is Kirby Sneidman. I'm a city planner here with the City of Orem. Item 3.1 is a zoning text amendment. The applicant, Mohammed Absunina, requests that the city amend a portion of Appendix A of the Orem City Code pertaining to SLU Code 5511 in the CM zone. What's in red is being proposed to be changed. Mohammed's requesting that the CM zone be have motor vehicle cells in as a permitted use. This is a portion of our Appendix A. N means not permitted, P means permitted. So he's requesting that we change the not permitted in the CM, the motor vehicle cells, to permitted, with a condition, that's the asterisk. If you look in the lower left, that the outside display will not be permitted after regular business hours. Mohammed is requesting this. He states that he does most of his cells online, but as a requirement to be a dealer, he has to have some amount of his cells. He has to have a display area, and so the CM zone is typically our office park zone, and it's not typically a place where retail business occurs, but we found a good compromise that we think works and allows him to do business and doesn't do too much harm to the other property owners in the CM zone. So the Development Review Committee determined that this request complies with the Orem City Code. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Sneidman? Is the applicant present? Is there anything you'd like to say, or if you could step to the microphone, state your name, and then give us your comment. Right there. Yes.
So, how you all doing? On the zoning, it's permitted for wholesale, but it's not permitted for retail, which is we're not going to be having like 50 cars outside. It's just like 5, 6, 7 cars. And on the inside of the building, we can fit 25 cars. It just because it's not permitted for wholesale and it's permitted for retail, we would ask you to change it for us to retail, since more cars is permitted, but less cars is not permitted. And that's all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any questions for
So,
the applicant?
The asterisk says outside display not permitted after regular business hours. Does that mean that there won't be able to be any cars parked outside after business hours? Is that what we're saying there?
That's correct. So when he would close his business, he wouldn't be able to leave that inventory out.
Okay, so they would have to fit inside the building at night.
That's correct.
Okay.
So enforcement of that would come if there were complaints. We would follow up on that, and then he'd be subject to that.
Okay.
Any other questions that anyone has? This is a public hearing with a recommendation to the city council, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anyone who'd like to speak to this subject to step to the microphone, please. Seeing no one coming to the microphone, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any further discussion or a motion.
I would like to make the motion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I move that we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to amend a portion of Appendix A of the Orem City Code pertaining to SLU Code 5511 in the CM zone from a non-permitted use to a permitted use.
Mr. Cochran has made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Ms. Jeffries seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3.2.
Item 3.2 is another zoning text amendment. The applicant, Kim O'Neill, requests the city amend Section 22-11-31B2C and Appendix M of the Orem City Code pertaining to the PD19 zone. The South Rim PRD, which is the PD19 zone, you can see that the red is the requested change. There previously in this zone, no basements were allowed where there's not sewer that's accessible by gravity. That was the city's way of ensuring that we didn't get housing that was built with basement sewage pumps, which in our experience have led to a lot of complications. The applicant suggests that they have a product which is popular using the basement without sewage or without plumbing, but just as an extra area, and that still is demand for that and would like to build that. And so the text amendment here is to allow 4 basement areas that are not accessible for gravity only if there is no plumbing. So as long as they on the site plan are to build a basement and not include plumbing, that they be permitted to do so. So the text would read, basement areas not accessible to sewer by gravity will be constructed as dry basements without restrooms. Also, as part of this, the applicant is wishing to amend the existing site plan. This is the existing site plan. It has 2 3-plexes. In the lower left, you can see that. The change to this site plan would be to have 1 6-plex, still same amount of units, just 1 6-plex, and rearrange that on the site for better access to the site and for the product that it's a new owner with this site, and so he wants to build a different product here. This is the proposed new elevation of how this 6-plex will look. The Development Review Committee determined this request complies with the Orem City Code, and staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Snyderman?
The word restrooms, it really means no plumbing of any kind, right?
That was our
Is that the intent?
That was our intent.
Plumbing fixtures is what we would say, because they're going to have probably the sewer main pipe that goes out to the sewer is going to...
Oh, yeah, where does the sewer pipe go? In the floor joist between the upper level and the lower level?
No, they have a crawl space that would be about a 4 foot right now.
That would be something determined later at when we
In the build
details for a site.
When you permit the project, okay. Well, I would suggest we amend the restrooms part to indicate more broadly plumbing.
Fixtures, maybe?
Plumbing fixtures. What would you think?
Does that need to be a motion?
Not yet.
Okay. We need to listen.
It'll come, yes.
All right.
It'll come. Any other questions? Is the applicant present? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, Carl, I'm here to answer any questions you have.
We could ask him the questions if he wants to step up.
If you want to step up, maybe there are a couple of questions here. Thanks, John.
You bet.
So, Did you have a question you wanted?
How are you doing, John?
Good.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah, just a question. If you're going to redo this, and on your plans, your main sewer line will be run below grade, correct?
Correct.
Do you have some preliminary plans that? I mean, you've done these things in the past.
I've done,
quite a few of them.
yes, hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And I was a little confused and didn't quite understand the prohibition against a sewage lift pump. In that the house that's on the site right now is gravity fed right into the sewer. So what I had told Kim and Allison's here, she's really the owner. I'm just the builder and kind of coaching them on how we could do this. The full basement is a help for storage. If these things ultimately get sold individually, as opposed to Kim and Allison owning them outright, we're going to plat it that way so that they could be sold individually.
Sure.
Then the basement's very desirable. I've built plenty of them and used the lift pumps, but apparently there's a problem. Is that the idea, is that to put a lift pump in these basements, you don't want lift pumps?
We don't want the pump.
Okay.
Yeah. But before we go any further, could you give your name for the record?
You bet.
So,
You bet. John Dester. Need an address or any of that?
no, I think we're good. We know where to find you.
You do know.
Certainly do.
Anyway, the basement's important, and it's a real asset. When you can do a basement, we should do a basement, and we can in that location. So I hope that answers that. I wondered why we couldn't use a lift pump on some of them if the people wanted to, but if we can't, we can't.
Yeah. And I think that the city's prohibition about the lift pumps is because if they go wrong, who do the people call?
Yeah, they should call their landlord, which will be Kim and Alice.
Yeah,
but
and
I get it. That you guys probably do get midnight phone calls about them. The other thing is well, apparently we'll be back in a few weeks to really talk about the site plan.
Yeah.
I'm happy to address any of the reasons why we wanted to change it from the 2 3s facing each other to 1 row of 6, but
like that.
that can be another day.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So
yeah, it's better.
all right.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dester? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a recommendation to the City Council that requires a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to speak to this subject to step to the microphone, please. Seeing no one coming to the microphone, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the Commission for any further comments or a motion.
You know, in our pre-discussion, we did discuss the idea of fixtures versus just a general plumbing.
Yes.
Precisely because the main sewer feed will probably drop about 4 feet below grade, I think, to meet the sewer, which is not the 8 feet that's necessary, or whatever it is to get below the sub-basement. So plumbing fixtures would be more specific in saying anything that's going to have running water in the basement should be precluded from this. And perhaps
Right.
in the motion we can.
Motion if you want.
Okay.
I will make a motion that we send a positive recommendation to the City Council that the city amend Section 221131 BC2 and Appendix M of the Orem City Code pertaining to basements in the PD 19 zone. With that recommendation is based on on changing. If we can go back there, if we can change without restrooms to without plumbing fixtures.
Mr. Bolton has made a motion, and I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Well done. Item 3.3.
Item 3.3 is the Northgate Plaza condominium conversion. The applicant, Greenfield Investments, requests the city approve the plat amendment for Northgate Plaza retail condominiums located at 822 North, 980 West in the PD 22 zone. The Northgate Retail Plaza, which is located near Winco on 800 North and 880 West, is a building which has 5 retail units. The owners would like to condominiumize this building into 5 legal separate units so that they can be sold separately to potential customers. Here are as the proposed plat and the elevations. This is an existing building. So again, this is just requesting that the legal lines change so these can be legally separately owned units. Is a more detailed picture of the site plan, the existing building. The Development Review Committee determined that this request complies with the Orem City Code, and staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the plat amendment for the Northgate Plaza retail condominiums.
Well, some of these units are ground level, some are upstairs.
That's true. 3 are ground level units and 2 are second story.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Snyderman? Okay. Is the applicant present? Is there anything you'd like to say or add to the discussion?
Just answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions? Okay, I guess there aren't. This item is an approval from the Planning Commission. We're the final approving authority. Is there any other discussion before we entertain a motion? Okay, then we will entertain.
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve the plat amendment for Northgate Plaza retail condominiums at 822 North, 980 West in the PD 22 zone.
Ms. Jeffries has made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cochran seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3.4.
Item 3.4 is a preliminary plat approval, Peyton's Crossing. The applicant, which is Millhaven Homes, requests that the city approve the preliminary plat for Peyton Crossing in the R8 zone located at 782 West and 2000 South. You've seen this before when this previously was a zone change to change it from OS5 to R8 to be able to permit smaller residential lots. That was approved. So the applicant is back with a plat which shows how these lots would be divided up into smaller lots that are greater than 8,000 square feet and thus permitted in the R8 zone. The Development Review Committee determined that this request complies with the Orem City Code. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the primary plat.
Any questions for Mr. Snyderman?
Which lots are the ones where the existing homes are? Is that 1 and 15 and 14 or? And number 1?
Number 1.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is the applicant present? Would you like to add anything? Does anyone have any questions? I do have one question. The piece of property to the north is pretty narrow and long, and you have a stub street that goes out to that. Recognizing you don't own that, was there thought given to trying to include that?
So Dolan, he's had that piece for a long time. It was recommended to us by staff to actually be able to access into that. I think in future development, and Roger could probably speak to this a little bit better than I can, but there's a school just to the north of that, and they have an access that runs right across that. So, like, technically, if he wanted to develop, or if the school, like, he's been in conversations with the school for the past couple years. He's actually a neighbor of mine, and so we've been talking about this, and 3 years ago, there's no way he was ever going to sell, and then conversations he's starting to talk about selling. But as far as for our subdivision, it doesn't make sense for us to do anything with him. And he's talking about if he ever does sell, it'll be to the school. That school's been approaching him quite a bit. But even if he didn't sell to the school, that access, and Roger, am I correct in that? There's an access that would come through. So a road that would come through right on the north side of his that he could, or there could be lots that face north that are accessed off of that road. So our stub into that is just for looping.
Okay. I'm sort of behind today. Can you give us your name for the?
Oh, sorry about that. My name is Jeremy Ackley. I'm with Millhaven Homes.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments or concerns?
Well, I'll make a motion. I recommend that we approve the primary plat for Peyton Crossing in the R8 zone, 782 West, 2000 South.
Mr. Spencer's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Moulton seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
We will go to item 4.1, which is a discussion item on the Xeriscape ordinance as opposed to the Zeroscape ordinance.
No, I did like the zero.
How do you say it?
I've
Or
seen it.
Xeriscape.
What you were really talking
Zero.
about?
Zero?
Xeriscape. Yep.
You were talking about the
Not zero.
Scape.
Yes, I have a couple of names.
Have they done that?
Oh, they've just let everything
Yeah.
die.
Oh, there's not
They'll
a.
have everyone.
Yeah.
No, they have done it on purpose.
Oh.
To let-
So
Don't go there, okay?
no, we'll see.
while we get set up, I'm just going to briefly introduce our team from BYU. Or do you all want to come up? We've got room.
Before we start into this, let me just make this comment that Ms. Jeffries has another commitment, and she's going to need to leave, and so if she gets up and walks out, please don't be offended.
Not you guys.
Just don't be offended then, just be offended now.
Don't worry. Okay, so while we get set up, so the discussion item tonight is being led by a group of students from BYU. They have been assisting city staff in the drafting and the research and the survey work for proposed ordinance updates to our landscaping ordinances. So they are all part of Michael Clay's 410 class? 410 class. This is, I believe, a sophomore level, junior level quantity. Yeah, for the planning program at BYU. So hopefully most of them are planners in training or thinking along those lines. Either way, they've got some great experience, hopefully from this project. They've assisted us with a lot of research. It takes a lot of research to bring an ordinance before the Planning Commission and City Council, and so they've helped us a lot in looking at other cities and what they have in their ordinances. And they've also helped us a lot with the surveying of our own citizens for this proposed ordinance. And what we're going to do as staff, we're going to take the ordinance draft that they've prepared and make the language fit with our current language so that we can take the ordinance in front of you within the next couple months for your recommendation to the City Council. So are we?
They're working on it.
We're working on the technical issues. I'll keep stalling.
We did talk about karaoke.
Good saying.
There you go. Looks like we've.
Hey, hello, you guys.
There you go. So make sure
Wait a
you've got that on the.
One young lady looks familiar.
There you go. Put it on the second desktop. Almost got it.
At least you don't have the blue screen of death. There we go.
Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to our students.
Okay, we are here today to present that proposed ordinance change that we have made regarding xeriscaping. So xeriscaping is not your conventional. Thank you. Xeriscaping is not your conventional type of landscape. As seen above, xeriscaping is a landscape method that incorporates the strategic use of native, drought-tolerant plants in combination with other non-living landscape elements such as mulch, bark chips, decorative rock features, and ornamental objects in the overall landscape project. Xeriscaping is not to be confused with xeroscaping, which is another form of landscape using very few to no live plants. This is common in desert areas that have very limited access to water. So the City of Orem currently has an ordinance regarding xeriscaping. Under this ordinance, all developed lots are to be landscaped using a combination of grass, shrubs, trees, flowers, vines, or other living plants. As well, under this ordinance, lots can be landscaped using bark chips, mulches, and peat moss, decorative rocks, bricks, boulders, and gravel, and ornamental objects, as long as those remaining landscape features cover no more than 30% of the developed lots. So the City of Orem has seen success and failure with this current ordinance. We have an example of a house and lot that is compliant, an aesthetically pleasing landscape yard, as well as some developed lots that you would not think to look twice at. So to help the city change this and update, we went ahead and we surveyed a sample size of 250 Orem residents. They were sampled using online methods. One of the questions they were asked was, would you consider xeriscaping your property? The respondents responded with a very positive 53% yes, they would consider it, and the other half was not all negative, but people were just open to it in the future. Another question that was asked on the survey for Orem residents was if artificial lawn should be allowed. So artificial lawn is an alternative to grass lawns. However, it is a more expensive form of landscaping to install because we're not just giving, the green styrofoam mats, but artificial lawn that looks like grass. So it is more expensive. It is more expensive to implement, but the water cost of maintaining it is much lower. So the respondents also responded with a 53% yes, that they would be open to having artificial lawn allowed in Orem, and 35% said no. The most important question that citizens were asked was, what percentage of land would you prefer your water conservative landscape to be? This question was accompanied with pictures of representations of each percentage of water conservative landscape, and a majority of the respondents fell in between 40 and 50%.
In order to figure out the best way to change the ordinance, we did some research on different cities in surrounding areas that had similar landscapes and similar climates to Utah. The first was Corona, California. In order to get their citizens to use less water on their lawns, they developed a rebate program, which it was called Cash for Grass. And whenever people took grass out of their lawns and put in some sort of xeriscaping, they gave them money. And
wait, did that have 5 leaves on the grass?
It's California, so
it is indeed.
And they also had a lot of success with this program. Sandy, Utah also has the Sega Lily Gardens, which they use to show citizens that xeriscaping is not only possible, but it can be beautiful, and it can be something that a regular citizen can do.
Would you pronounce that word again, the S-E-G-O?
Sego.
Okay. You're not from here.
Fort Collins, Colorado also had education workshops and garden parties to make xeriscaping something that wasn't just a hassle. It was something that people did socially. And this created a lot of success in Fort Collins. And you can see a house. This is the same house, and the first is with just a regular lawn, and the second is with xeriscaping. And it is still able to look like a place where you'd want to live. There were some places that didn't have as much success because they weren't as staunch in their xeriscaping ordinance. Salt Lake City, Utah, they never called their ordinance a xeriscaping ordinance, and people didn't really know about it. And people didn't know that they could xeriscape, and so they didn't. That also happened in Menifee, California. Few people came to ask about it, despite the fact that they had a lot of information for people who might want to xeriscape, and it was never enforced. So people just never got around to xeriscaping their property. So the new proposed ordinance would have all lots be maintained with at least 50% live vegetation on the lot. So 50% of your lot has to be covered with some sort of live vegetation. And a non-exhaustive list can be found in the appendix of the xeriscaping ordinance. And it also allows for artificial or synthetic turf.
Wait a minute. Noxious weeds are considered?
Sorry?
Noxious weeds are not considered.
Yes, they're not native, so...
I got some neighbors I need to talk to about this.
And then also, you can't use more than 50% of your lot can't be, no more than 50% of your lot can be anything that is non-living, such as bark chips, mulches, and peat moss, decorative rocks or bricks, and ornamental objects such as fountains.
So this is a legend from that appendix of the vegetation options. You'll see the sun shows the amount of sunlight that the plants will require. The water needs are filled by the level of water in the water droplet. And then that little pot shows the type of planting material that the plants will need. The meter on the bottom shows when the flowers or the plants will bloom. So the green is when they are not in season, and then the colored is when the plants are in bloom time. As well, the person is representative of 6 feet. So these are a few of the vegetation options listed in the appendix. So you have cushion globe, malum, showy, sandwort, and as well those legend items are on the bottom. So they require a little water, a lot of sun. They bloom in the spring and summer, and then that is the size in comparison to the person. Some more include short stem buckwheat and desert needle grass.
In order to see how much this would help citizens, I made a fiscal model that showed how much people would be saving by moving to a xeriscaped lawn. So currently, I approximated that people had grass on 90% of their lawn, and in order to water it, they had to spend $26.63 per month. On the new ordinance, if they didn't even want to put in the xeriscaping, they could just have 50% of their lot be lawn, and that would be $10.62 per month, which is a $16 difference. But if they wanted to go all the way with their xeriscaping on 50% of their lawn, they would be paying $1.88 per month, which is $24.75 different from the 90% lawn.
Mm-hmm. So we modeled some of these fiscal changes out for you. The house on the left shows 50% xeriscape and 50% grass. So if someone who had their lot completely covered with grass made 50% of that xeriscaping, the total would be $12.50, that $1 from xeriscaping and around $10 from watering the lawn. The house on the right shows just a 50% xeriscaping. There's still live vegetation and rock in the lawn, and to water that would be costing the resident $1.88 per month.
What's the brown stuff in that view?
That would be rocks or dirt, that non-living material.
And this isn't only going to save money for the individual citizens. The Orem city, even if only 10% of residents xeriscape their yards, the city would save 865 million gallons of water per year. And over a month's worth of water would be saved per year, every year.
And could we sell that water, Jason? Sell that water then to the north, West Mountain or something to make our tax base just. I mean, that would increase our tax.
So to implement this new ordinance, there are current conservancies and committees in the city of Orem that would help educate the public. There's the Water Conservancy District Meeting, the Beautification Committee, the Natural Resources Stewardship Committee, and then regular ordinance enforcement. Using all these things, helping educate the public, showing them what their options are, how they can xeriscape, what these native species are, would help implement the ordinance into the residents' lots as well as developed lots and help save the city water.
When you talk about the water savings, I would assume you're talking about a drip system that would be installed.
Yes.
To each of which was not mentioned in this.
May
have been implied, but
yeah,
wasn't mentioned. And are you two guys just bookends, or are you going to?
We're just here for eye candy.
They're the presentation.
That's why I'm here. If you'll notice.
And if you have any questions, we can answer them. So.
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
The percentages, that is of the open space that's not covered by buildings?
Yes.
Not the whole lot, okay. I'm wondering if you have a feel for, and maybe this is a loaded question, I don't know. Do you think it's harder to take care of a xeriscaped yard than it is to take care of a grass yard?
So I think for a xeriscaped yard, it's going to take more effort up front. And a little more maintenance than a regular lawn, simply because regular lawns, they're everywhere, and everybody knows how to take care of them. Xeriscaping is something that takes a little bit more information, which is really where the importance of the education of citizens comes in, right? Yes, it is harder to take care of, but I don't think it's something that is debilitating by any means.
So what does taking care of it mean?
You need to do the landscaping, but also
I understand about the upfront part. But
yeah.
2 years in, what are you doing every week?
Taking care of the drip system. It would be something similar to like putting a sprinkler on your lawn if you don't necessarily have a system built in. But they have some really sophisticated drip systems that they might take a little maintenance, but it's nothing like it would be akin to mowing your lawn.
Well, so how often do things die, and you have to put a new one in?
Not often. They're native vegetation, so they're acclimated to the climate of Utah already. And so where grass, if you don't take care of it for a little bit, it will just die in the heat. These plants have less of a chance for that to happen.
And have you been involved in any projects that you've done a small xeriscape yourselves? Have you been out there doing anything? Is that going to be part of your senior year, perhaps?
Maybe.
I think it would be a great program to get involved in.
Xeriscape your apartment or something?
No, I was thinking of
flower box
my yard.
We've been involved in a lot of research, but not personally creating a xeriscape landscape.
And on your research, when you talk about the drip systems or the different types of irrigation, you've indicated in here you've got Central Utah Water Conservancy District. You've looked at beautification committees. There are a lot of rebates in place right now that I think Orem City's involved in, like if you put in a ratio device and you have, you're looking at humidity levels and you're measuring your groundwater, et cetera, around your live plants. Now, have you been examining those, or is that going to be part of the course next time? Oh, rats. So you have an established course that...
So,
Am I allowed to answer a question?
Yeah, definitely.
No, you're not.
No? Oh, never mind.
From the side here. So they showed a few images of native plants.
They did.
That's just a sampling of a very extensive appendix that they've created through their research online with the Water Conservancy District of a non-exhaustive list of plants that would thrive within a xeriscaping type environment.
Is there good duplicability in what you are proposing? Can you take this and design a plan for any environment? Have you thought that through too?
Our current plan will work for places that are similar to Orem in climate. But obviously, if you live in somewhere like Alaska, they're going to have some pretty different landscaping to do.
But see, you should be able to pick.
Temperatures and
You
things.
should be looking toward that. Is what I would think.
Yeah.
That you have your matrix developed, and you can plug in.
So how we did research on other ordinances that use xeriscaping, those were kind of particular to their, climates and lots and how heavy of a use their residential land was. So, for example, like Nevada and Las Vegas, we didn't spend a lot of time researching there because of their xeriscaping, like a majority of their landscaping done with rocks and non-living plants. But the goal of this updated ordinance is that it can be an example to future ordinances seeking to xeriscape. So based on the research and, the data and the surveys that we have conducted with the citizens of Orem, this ordinance would be a good example for other cities to be able to research and conduct their own surveys and see what will work for their citizens. That's why we wanted to involve the community much so we could get, their input on what they wanted to see where they're living.
So I had a question, if I could. So a few slides back on your cost, your savings, or how much it costs to water a lawn. How did you come up with that amount?
So I found there was a study done by Utah State on how much water usage Orem does, and I was able. They had information on how much water the average household used for both in summer months and in winter months. And then through that, I was able to find the average amount people were spending on water per month, just for an individual. And then, in order to find how much people were spending per month, you take the water tier tax system that you currently have, and then using that, you find out how many gallons it is, and then you find out how much money it is for the gallons they're using. And then using, for the 50% lawn, I just use 50% of, not 50%, but like the 50% in accordance with like a 90% lawn, right? So, and that was still in the water tier tax system. So you can see that like $10.62 isn't exactly half of $26.63, simply because if you use less than 1,000 gallons of water in per month, then you pay less, right? And then for the xeriscaping, it turned the way that you found out water usage for native vegetation is you look at the crown size of the plants, and the amount covered by crown size of the plants, you water, I forget the exact number, I think it's 1 inch of water per inch of crown per day. And that was how I came up with the 50% xeriscaping, by looking at like crown sizes of the average crown sizes of plants that would be used in Orem City for xeriscaping. And that's how I came up with the money per month for the xeriscaped lawn.
So I'm correct, am I correct in assuming then that you took the amount of water that was used for landscaping, or just water that was used, subtracted out how much a person would use on average for just household needs, toilets, washing machines. So this would be landscaping water.
Yes, this is only landscaping.
And then you amortize it over 12 months. So the amount per month would increase.
So is this average specific to Orem or just Utah?
This is specific to Orem.
Okay.
And it's just an average.
Do you feel good about those numbers, Bill? I mean, do you think they seem reasonable?
The reason why I bring this up is that the Planning Commission and the City Council is a tough bunch. And so when you bring stuff like this to them, this is stuff they're going to want to know.
Okay.
Is this specific to us? And is this an average home in Orem, or is this because we've got $1 million homes to smaller homes, and so it'd be good to point that out in the presentation to alleviate a lot of the questions, make it more smoother for adoption.
Yeah,
I definitely will.
And you could say, like, for average for a 1,400 square foot home,
right?
It would be great to have that looked at, because the savings would be dramatic, regardless. I would think. There's a lot of variables involved that you have found out just as you've gone through, and in Orem, the different kinds of soil that we have. Up here on the bench, we have what's called a gravelly loam, if gravel is this big, But they call it a gravelly loam, Utah State University standards. And, of course, that's a lot more drainage. And where you have a clay-based soil, it's going to be a lot less drainage.
Those are called boulders, not...
Yes. I
have a question. How does xeriscape compare to low-impact development? Or is there a comparison?
That's a good question.
We were told to ask hard questions.
And when we talk variables, I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
I think xeriscaping is very situational based. Each type of development is going to have different circumstances. Low impact, if that's more native, more rock, like not affecting the landscape. There's plants that aren't going to use as much soil, that don't need planted as deep. There's grass, the artificial turf, all of that stuff. So I think it really just depends situation by situation. Some might impact more than others. We're hoping that, the maintenance not having to go under and do all these heavy sprinkler systems and all this piping and all that stuff will save a lot of the maintenance costs with simple drip irrigation or these plants that, the rain in Utah is sufficient for their survival.
So can some of these plants be used in a rain garden situation or something like that?
Truck farming, I believe.
Somebody push his button.
Yeah, so the list of native species, that's why we emphasize the native species, so that you're not, getting all these foreign species that are going to require a lot of maintenance or a lot of upkeep or aren't going to last or going to die in the winter, and you're going to spend more time planting them than you are, watching them bloom.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple of questions. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
So I'd assume that a driveway would be counted in the percentage of non-plant space.
Yes.
So that we don't just have a gigantic driveway going. But maybe I didn't know.
So in the ordinance, we have the full one, and it says at least 50% of the area excluding reasonable driveways contained within a required front or side yard shall be landscaped. So this isn't including the driveway. Yeah.
We might want to define that as far as the city. Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay. And then my other question is, do you have a study on how much this type xeriscape landscaping would cost versus the standard what we normally find now in our city, the cost difference of what it might be to put in?
The difference in cost in just doing the upfront landscaping, I know online it said that the a xeriscape lot in places that are in California, so this is going to be more expensive than in Utah, it was $10,000 for a lot, but they didn't specify lot size, and they didn't specify it was just some company saying we will.
California, the lots are about 5 feet wider than the house.
Yeah, bike here. Yeah, be careful.
But there wasn't much information on how much it would cost. This would be something that that the citizens would be putting in work themselves to really put together, almost, because there are examples of some people that are doing this type of work by themselves without any companies. It's definitely something that you can do as a citizen, not necessarily as a company.
May I clarify your question? Are you asking what the cost of changing a lot will to be? So to take a lot that is all grass and make it a xeriscaped lawn, or are you asking for the...
Actually, just versus if someone were to build a home and they put in the typical what we find landscaping now versus a xeriscaped lot,
okay,
what the cost difference would be. That was my question, but it would be nice to know also just to transition.
Conversion cost too.
Conversion cost, yeah.
Yeah, because you could, did you examine conversion costs versus what's there, and did you examine, as he said, just the upfront, if it's a new build, the cost between xeriscaping and just putting in a regular lawn, and the regular lawn costs as you know, are yearly, and there's a lot of money you put into a lawn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no, we don't have an example or like a model worked up to show that cost of I'm developing a house, how much is X amount of square feet of sod versus some rock and a plant. But that is why we took this step to involve those committees with implementation so that they can be part of the education and, this residential area, your lot size is average this much, they were developed with this type of landscape and it costs this much. Changing it to this, we wanted to involve the community more with that and work with that with the implementation committees and districts.
And water conservancy is a big thing that we look at. No, I'm going to let this go. There's a lot of stuff that can be done here.
Can I help just a little bit?
Sure.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for letting my students do this for you again this year. You guys are awesome. The reason why costing is hard is because so much of it can depend on how much the individual is going to do themselves. I have a neighbor who rented a sod cutter from Ace Rents. I think it cost him $50 for a day. He cut out all of his lawn. He went up into the National Forest Service and dug out plants and put them in his yard. So for $50, he converted his lawn to a xeriscaping yard, and he has a drip system for the cost of $50. Now, we can't pretend that most people are going to do it that way, but there's that all the way up to having a landscape company come in and make that conversion for you, which is going to be thousands of dollars, right, to have that done. So, students, the right answer was we don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Don't be afraid to say that. These are great individuals, but they've heard that before. They've heard the we don't know answer before. You don't always have to have an answer. This was a great project, and one of the best things, one of the most interesting things from my perspective was just to see how many Orem residents are interested in this. That not necessarily from an environmental, but over half, so that they had some interest, primarily from a cost savings standpoint. Somebody asked about the maintenance costs with my neighbor that xeriscapes versus my lawn, which is all in lawn. The difference in maintenance is weeds, right? When you have a lawn, thick lawns prevent weeds. When you have weeds on a thick lawn, you buy some weed and feed, you spray it in the lawn, and the weeds are gone. When you have xeriscaping, you can't use weed and feed because it will kill the xeriscape plants. It will treat them as weeds and they will die. So there's some manual labor of going in and plucking them or being exceptionally careful with some Roundup so you don't kill your proper plants. But I'd say that's the biggest difference in maintenance is the weeding. That one of the benefits of lawns is that they're pretty weed resistant. When you get a weed, if you spray, and you've seen your neighbors that allow too many weeds in their lawns and then it kind of takes over. But a regular lawn, if you're weeding and feeding it regularly, sprinkling it regularly, I mean, in Utah, they're surprisingly weed resistant.
That brings that other question up before on the rebate issue. Are the rebates a city rebate? Are they a state? Are they national?
Central Utah Water has some.
Yes.
Depends on the company. Orem City currently hasn't, but other Central Utah had one. I think a couple years ago when I bought my water ring, I got $100 back for buying it.
For your Ratio or whichever one you got on that. I'd be familiar with that. So the rebate issue is one, but the savings issue is huge. That's the other thing. And I'll just say this: my doctoral minor is statistics, and one of the things that I'm looking at is, I think a 53% positive response is poor. I think if you're presenting this right, it should be more like at the 80%. And I don't know how you vetted your questions, how you asked them. What it was, if they were understandable or not.
They weren't allowed to bias them towards xeriscaping.
No.
So they had to be very careful in their wording of how they did things, because we were afraid that if we showed, that would be the question, right? Let us see your instrument. Were you biasing them in favor of it? We got 53% showing interest in a pretty unbiased, pretty neutral instrument.
Okay.
So just so you know, the survey is still on the Orem forum right now. It's still live. You can take a look at the questions that we've had.
I think I might. I'm sorry that I didn't get on and answer it. Yeah, get on and see that.
So this isn't a meeting for public comment, but sir, you're the only one here, and you raised your hand and had a question. Please.
Sure.
Oh,
I shouldn't say you're the only one here.
Well, we have a scout.
But you're the only one who had a question.
Yeah. My name's John Lilly. I live in North Orem, and I'm excited that you're considering this. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. And so we live in an area that's dry, and I'm shocked that we are not at this point already. My understanding, I've been researching this for a couple of years because I'm looking to do this in my yard, and I'm just looking to see how much I can get away with. Okay.
At least 50% right now.
Well, okay, the ordinance that I looked at a few years ago was 70. Was that okay?
Okay.
Is that no longer correct?
That is current.
That's current.
That is current.
But it's
So
70, not 70% grass.
it's 70% at 2 foot up,
So
right?
bushes could be shown.
Yeah, it could be anything like that. Okay. I think it should be 20. Okay? Should be 20. Because we waste a lot of water. Okay? And we really shouldn't be doing that. So I'm excited to hear your feedback. I'm going to hold off, I guess, until I get some input. But I admire you for doing this. You're doing a great.
It's great.
I'm 62, so I call you kids. Just the way it is. All right. So I'm in favor of what you're doing. I would encourage you to pursue it aggressively. Thank you. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
I know the other side of this. My wife loves her grass, and she's going to make me keep grass.
Well, we should have the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what this ordinance gives, right? You don't have to.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't want to. And
it's actually more choices that would be given to people.
But it's available, and it's a nice thing to do. And we can encourage contractors when they're building these subdivisions to xeriscape too, as part of the ordinance.
Yeah, they could offer it.
A quick comment. I don't know how many of you have lawns and how often you mow your lawn. At least weekly. I know some that mow it twice a week. You fertilize it, you water it. So maintenance-wise, so it's going to cost you a little bit more to convert. But maintenance-wise, you're looking at maybe every couple of weeks to go out and look for weeds. But the actual physical labor savings, in addition to the water savings and pocketbook savings, is a big deal in my opinion. It may not pay for itself in a couple of months, but over several years of less mowing and all that kind of stuff, it actually will save over time. So it's not an idea we're just going to save money and we're going to convert it and you're never going to have to touch your yard.
Cool.
If that's your idea, you're going to have your yard full of weeds because they're going to come up through it. The other thing is xeriscaping has to be installed correctly. If you don't have the weed barriers, if you don't have the right thickness of the gravel and things, weeds are just going to go right through it. The thicker the material, the less likely weeds are going to be able to root, or the easier it's going to be to pull them out. So it is going to take some education on how to install it properly, and then over time, the maintenance is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. And so all the cost benefits, and maybe that can be another course that's along with this one as a cost benefit analysis concerning.
One of the things that inspired this, one of the things that we look at is the growth of Utah County. We're adding about 20,000 people on average per year to our county right now. That's a lot of water. And if we can get people to consume less water per person, there'll be more water for future generations to use, for future growth to happen in our county. Economic development is something we're all very important. It's very important to all of us. And just keeping a number on those figures as population grows, as lawns get put in over and over again, and we have a certain amount of water to use for that population, and the farther we can make that go, I think the better off we'll all be.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
I've seen how this turns out. I used to live in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
That explains a lot.
And I figured it out once, and it was, back then, that was 30 years ago almost. Yeah, it was 30 years ago. It was 50 cents an hour to run a hose. Jeez. And it's probably $2 an hour to run a hose now.
More now, for sure.
And when it gets like that, then it's nice for people to know their options because they'll be driven to it.
I'd really like to have a copy of this presentation. Can I get one of those? I got up this morning and I told my wife we were talking about this today, and I got a lecture on what the ordinance ought to be, so I need something to go home with. You were fairly close to what she said, so that's good for both of us. But anyway,
that's funny. I got up this morning, Dave, and I went out and edged trimmed, mowed.
Okay, any other questions?
Just a comment. We'll be
Yes.
as soon as we can to get the ordinance developed and be back before you and the city council within a few months.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your
Lily.
efforts. Yes.
Know when this will be resolved?
Not yet. It's in the process, but in a couple of months.
Couple months, okay. 20%.
We'll talk later.
Thank you. I appreciate your doing this.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts and thank you. And you did a good job. I think they should get A's.
We think so too.
Remember, B- is supposed to be the average. Right? Yeah, they tell us that in all departmental meetings.
Okay, thank you. So we have.
Those are my contact.
What we have that scout. Do you want?
What did you want?
Thank you, Planning Commission. We love you as always. You're great to work.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Eye candy. I'm so used to that myself.
That is not.
I'm so used to being eye candy myself.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the minutes from our last meeting on April 4th. Were there any concerns or items there, corrections that we need to be made?
No, I sorry.
Okay.
They were fine.
I have examined the minutes and moved that we approve them.
I'll second that.
Thank you so much.
And all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Director, nothing. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I wasn't making it, but I will.
Sounded like